So as you know, the book Leadership is written by Henry Kissinger. For those who are not familiar with Kissinger, Kissinger is actually a German-born American politician who was born on May 27th, 1923 in Perth, Germany. He is still very much alive, 99 years old, coming to 100. He basically served as the US Secretary of State. He also served as a National Security Advisor under the presidential administrations of Richard Nixon, as well as Gerald Ford. As a young man, he came to the US in 1938 and was a naturalized US citizen by 1943. He then served in the Army from February 1943 to July 1946. He graduated from Harvard College in 1950, received his master's as well as PhD from Harvard University in 1952 and 1954 respectively. From 1954 until 1969, he was a member of the faculty of Harvard University in both the Department of Government and the Center for International Affairs. He was the director of Harvard International Seminar from 1952 to 1969. So highly involved as an academic. I thought it'd be interesting to sort of draw upon lessons from these 6 key leaders covered in this book. These 6 leaders were profoundly affected by the dramatic era in which they lived through, which included the World War, and really helped to shape the world's aftermath. What happened after, where economies had to be reorganized, domestic structures redefined, as well as international relations restored. Through the lens of Kissinger, we dissect the hallmark character of each of these 6 leaders, which we will discuss further. One, as you can see on this slide, The Strategy of Humility by Konrad Adenauer, where he had to shepherd Germany past the lowest point of its history by abandoning its decades-long conquest for the domination of Europe, anchoring Germany in the Atlantic Alliance and rebuilding it on a moral foundation which really reflected his own Christian values and democratic convictions. Strategy of Will by Charles de Gaulle, where he had to guide France's historical transition from being a very defeated, divided, and overstretched empire into a very prosperous nation state. The Strategy of Equilibrium by Richard Nixon, where he effectively put American foreign policy on a very constructive global footing by reopening relations with China, bringing about a peace process that would transform the Middle East, and emphasizing a concept of world order based on equilibrium. The Strategy of Transcendence by Anwar Sadat, where he endeavored to restore Egypt's lost territories and self-confidence while securing long elusive peace with Israel. The Strategy of Excellence by Lee Kuan Yew, where he really shaped the evolution of a multi-ethnic port city, which was back then really in a Singaporean term, a kampong village surrounded by hostile neighbors and emerging as a secure, well-administered and prosperous city-state. And last but not least, The Strategy of Conviction by Margaret Thatcher, where she renewed her country through economic reform and a foreign policy that balanced boldness with prudence.
I think that is, to me, everybody may have a different conclusion on this book, but to me, this is as much a chronology of Kissinger's diplomatic achievement as it is on, say, leadership per se. And the amount of, I think this will be an excellent textbook for any course in international relations. Because he go into such detail on all these significant events in contemporary history, international relations. And what strikes me, for example, is that, and I just draw some insight that I got from reading the book, in terms of his entry to China by Nixon. It seems to me that, and what I actually got out of this is that, there's a lot about this balance of power that, mainly the U.S. actually mainly opened up to China because they wanted to counterbalance Soviet. And same thing, that China at the time has an urgency to compromise or to actually move to engage with U.S. because the Soviet has like 400,000 troops on this border, and this actually then why therefore I guess would say why therefore we have this switch from engagement to containment. I mean, the current atmosphere is very much of a containment policy by the U.S. And I think again, this is the geopolitics that the Soviets no longer a major threat to the U.S. or at least a secondary threat, and also the terrorists, the Al-Qaeda's, and that also had disappeared. So the U.S. then pivot to the Pacific. So I think one is this counterbalance issue in international relations.
Let me start by a few words about my interactions with Dr. Kissinger. My first interaction was when Peter and I were at Georgetown together in the Masters of Science and Foreign Service program in 1977 when Kissinger was appointed as a university professor. Now, his appointment drew a lot of criticism on campus, but I was desperate to hear what he had to say and to get a chance to actually hear him. I still remember being mesmerized by his lecture on the negotiations he conducted with Zhou Enlai in 1971. And his high regard for Zhou. He said that never in his 60 years had he met as compelling a figure as Zhou Enlai. In his book on China, he called Zhou subtle and sensitive, helping to overcome many of the pitfalls in the relationship.